afternoon. I'm Brenda Houston, the Executive Director of the Central Ohio American Heart Association. And I'm excited to be joining you for the first digital HeartChase experience. Thank you to all of you for joining us today, and thank you to our sponsors for supporting the American Heart Association's life-saving mission. As an organization, we're focused on the challenges of our nation, the ongoing deaths and health issues from COVID-19, and how we can continue to move forward. Through research, advocacy, and education, we are striving to mitigate the disproportionate impact of COVID-19, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and other chronic diseases that burden all communities. We're leading with our hearts and will continue to stand together as a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives. I'd like to give special thanks today to our chair, Rob Untitled, for his guidance and leadership, especially during these trying times. Volunteers are the lifeblood of our organization, and we're so grateful to have partners like Rob who are dedicated to the health of our communities. I'd also like to give special thanks to our volunteer committee members, as well as incoming chair, Dave Troutman of Park National Bank. Thank you. The HeartChase movement is about celebrating and inspiring 365 days of heart-healthy activity. Together, we have the power to give our community a healthier, stronger future. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. We certainly appreciate the time and effort everyone put into this event. I know it's not what we'd like to be having, a much more personal adventure downtown in Newark, but understand this is what needs to be done. Certainly been my pleasure to be the chair of 2020, although it's certainly been a challenging time. We recognize that there are a number of folks in Lincoln County that are impacted by cardiovascular disease, stroke, other heart-related issues, and we know that the American Heart Association mission really fits well with ours, improving the health in our community. In that number of folks who are affected by cardiovascular disease, we recognize that we have the ability to impact their outcomes, both hopefully perhaps after diagnosis, but maybe more so important before they even reach any kind of need for clinical care. There are a number of sponsors that made this possible in 2020. Certainly Lincoln Memorial Health Systems as our presenting sponsor. Also, Park National Bank always involved in everything in and around the county. We'll hear from David Troutman later. As a leading sponsor, as well as the Asian Cooperative. Certainly thank Todd Ware, the Jerry McLean Company, Jerry McLean, of course, and Doug Freeman. Have always been so supportive of this event. We also have two other significant local sponsors, Robertson Construction and Denison University. You know, I was the 2020 chair, and I really had great support from the volunteer executive leadership team. I want to extend my sincere thanks to them. If it all stayed, no, I'm kidding. If they were here, they would all stay. But there were a number of folks who actually helped out quite a bit above and beyond the call. And if we were in person, I would certainly recognize them. Also, you know, while it's time for us to come together and inspire ourselves, hopefully for today's event, we are pleased to be working on this to be building a healthier community. We hope the topics we put together today will prove to be valuable and useful. So not only just providing you some information, but with some exercise and some muscle toning and muscle strengthening exercises you can do inside to get colder weather, and also some simple steps to keep you safe as we approach winter. And we'll talk a little bit about vaping as well. The mission of the American Heart Association is to be a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives, and participation in the HeartChase assists with this mission by helping us raise funds to find life-saving research, breakthroughs, and other scientific discoveries to everyday life through the American Heart Association. I mentioned our mission to improve the health of the community, so this does fit quite well. Of course, with COVID on our minds and part of our daily lives, the attendance here is proof. We have 9 people socially distanced appropriately in the room wearing masks, and hopefully hopefully quite a few folks online. If not currently online, this will be available to you at a later time for those of you who perhaps could not get out of work to view this. Our first presenter, and we're pleased to have him in person with us, is Dr. Hassan Raju, MD. He's going to be talking about COVID and the effects on heart health. To give you a little background on Dr. Raju, he's been with us since 2011. He earned his doctorate of medicine degree at the University School of Medicine in Syria, completed a residency in internal medicine at the University of Chicago Vice Hospital, completed cardiology and interventional cardiology fellowship at St. Louis University Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. He's fellowship trained in peripheral vascular disease intervention and is board certified in cardiovascular disease, interventional cardiology, and nuclear cardiology. So without further ado, thank you for being here, Dr. Raju, to take me through some of the COVID effects on the heart.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for the great introduction. And hello, everybody.
5:23.
If you need to go, please do.
This is
5:23. Code blue. 5:23.
All right. Today I'm gonna try to keep it brief, and we're gonna talk, as Rob said, about the effects of COVID on the heart. Now, I get a warning. We still don't know a whole lot about COVID. Most of the studies are still a small number of patients in the study. It's going to take probably a year to know for sure. Most of the time, it's retrospective, unfortunately. But we'll talk in general about the COVID, the heart, what do we know so far. The first thing, I mean, COVID, this has been like something happened every 100 years, nothing like this since the Spanish flu 1920. So it had a tremendous effect on health in general. So as you can see here, initially we started with problems. The initial problem was patients were not showing up at the hospital, they had a heart attack. Now, fortunately, this has been over with. Most people are not as scared as used to be before. Initially, we had a lot of late presentations with heart attack, young people coming 2 or 3 days. And as we always say, the heart, every minute counts, and these guys are young 2 days, the damage is done, and sometimes there's not much benefit from doing it. So this is better, which is great. Other stuff still persistent with us till now, high stress, and follow-ups in the clinic. This actually has gotten much better. Older patients are showing up right now. I think the hospital is doing a great job. They extended the visitation area and social distancing and the shields between people that are waiting, and try to move faster so patients don't have to wait too long. So that's getting better. With the heart, we found initially that 40% of patients who had COVID-19 had some kind of involvement of the heart. So 25% of these patients had the involvement of the heart. That was responsible for 40% of death. Because the number one cause of death initially was cardiac arrhythmias, obviously in addition to ARDS or respiratory distress syndrome. Now, more studies retrospectively showed that patients, even if they were healthy, they were not very sick, and they looked at them later, they did have some cardiac involvement. A study published in JAMA, they did autopsy on 39 COVID patients, and they realized that these patients had infection of the heart, and that was not symptomatic. I guess the reason initially when these studies were done, most people were scared of these patients. I don't think we did great care initially, even on the vent. Well, this is all better now. Everybody's closer. We don't have enough PPEs initially. Now it's available. So I don't think we're missing these things as much anymore. But interestingly, cardiac MRI was done on patients who recovered from COVID. 78% had some cardiac involvement in the form of some inflammation. Now, I don't know what the long-term consequences of this going to be. It's been only talking a few months here. This stuff might take years to show up, I don't want to scare people too much. I mean, I think there's a lot of fear in the community from this. Most people recover, they're doing okay. Could there be some later-term effect from that inflammation or the slight increase in the troponin? Troponin basically is an enzyme released by the heart muscle when they're damaged. But we don't know that yet. Again, just to summarize the cardiac impacts, initially was avoiding medical care and delayed in care. The second impact, people get myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart muscle, and that could have bad consequences of arrhythmias and resulting in death. And the other, which is a big one, is heart failure. It's either from the inflammation, they end up with a weak heart muscle and they have inflammation, and they have heart failure, or actually initially our patients were not showing up in the congestive heart failure clinic, they were not taking their medication, and that's probably what led to increased heart failure. In the recovery phase, it's really hard to tell who has a problem with COVID. So when we follow up on those patients, we recommend to the family physicians just to screen these patients. Whoever have these kind of symptoms, maybe they require further evaluation. If they have shortness of breath with activity that's not improving, they have chest pain, swelling in the ankles, palpitations, irregular heartbeat, inability to lay flat, lightheadedness or dizziness, probably it's worth getting an ultrasound of the heart or MRI if it's available to see if there's any damage to the heart muscle. The current treatment is going to be no different than any patient with congestive heart failure from other reasons. It would be beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, and diuretics, and the follow-up in the CHF clinic. And that's pretty much it I have about the heart today. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Raju. Normally, I think we would have questions, but with a limited audience, we will let you go. So I appreciate the information, and just knowing you're here and available for our community, I think makes many of us feel much, much better. So, and I think great advice. Seek care if you have issues. Don't delay that because of concerns, whether it's because of COVID concerns or you're concerned with what the diagnosis might actually be, but certainly the sooner you can get here and we can get you help, the better off you will be. Now, I mentioned we wanted to make this a little interactive, so I think you would be able to partake in what you're going to see now at your place of work, if you're allowed. I'm not sure if you're in a cubicle or where you may be watching this, but certainly you can do it at home. And that is some cardio exercise tips from one of our long-standing physical therapists, Dave Alianello. And he will be narrating this, and the demonstrations will be done by Taylor Wright and Cody Wilkett, if I'm pronouncing the last name right, both a physical therapist and a physical therapy student from Ohio University. I'll give you a little background on Dave in particular. I mentioned long-term physical therapist. He's been with us since 1989, so upwards of 30 years plus. Received a degree in Allied Medical Professional Physical Therapy from Ohio State University, and he's a certified strength and conditioning specialist. So I will turn it over to Dave Alianello to give you some cardiac exercises.
Thanks, Rob. What we'd like to do now is show you some cardio exercises that's going to attack the cardiovascular system and essentially give us some more endurance, some stamina, let us get through the day a little bit stronger, a little bit healthier. So one of the basic cardio exercises is going to be just walking. If you have a track to walk around, you're outside, in the house, perfect, thank you. Next we go to a standing walk. So this, if you don't have very much room in your apartment, you can just march in place. So he's going to demonstrate jumping rope. Again, another challenging exercise. Just make sure you have clearance. Watch the boom mic. This one a little bit. There you go. And Taylor will do the jumping jacks for us. Thank you. Next cardio exercise is going to be burpees off the floor. Also a great core exercise. Thank you. Taylor will do the modified version off of a stool. There we go, thanks. Cody's going to demonstrate the mountain climber off the floor. Thanks. And Taylor will do the mountain climber off of the bench. There we go, thank you. And our last cardio exercise will be a lateral shuttle. And the modified version will be the step overs. And that's perfect. So as far as cardio goes, how long should you do these exercises? Excuse me. You can set up an interval like 30 seconds on, 30-second rest, based on your own physical conditioning, 20 seconds on, 30-second rest, or whatever. Or if you're outside and about, you can go for as long as you can. Always make sure that you finish off with a good stretch. He's going to demonstrate a couple stretches for us here. Get the shoulders stretched out after working the upper body. Crossover stretch. This will be your static stretch where you hold for 10, 15 seconds. Tricep stretch over the top. And we'll do a standing hamstring off of the bench here. Remember, when you stretch, it should not be painful. It should be a little bit uncomfortable because you're stretching some tight muscles, but it should not be painful. There we go. And thank you. I appreciate your attention. Thanks again. Thanks again, Rob.
All right, well, thank you, Dave, and hopefully you were able to get up and do some of those activities, jumping jacks or jump rope perhaps. I think a lot of these exercises we know are good for us, but maybe this gives us some motivation to dust off the jump rope or get back to exercising. I mentioned the next topic, which has really become prevalent in our society, in our community, and unfortunately probably affecting certainly all populations, but the younger population in particular, really stems from vaping, and both how popular that's become and really some of the unknown dangers, especially for what may be in the e-cigarettes or the vaping material. We're fortunate that Dr. John Lazar, a pediatrician, has joined us today to talk about the dangers of vaping and e-cigarettes. He is an inpatient pediatrician who joined us in 2017. He earned his medical degree from The Ohio State University College of Medicine in Columbus, Ohio. Completed his pediatric residency at Nationwide Children's Hospital, also in Columbus, and is board certified in pediatrics. So, Dr. Lazar, please enlighten us about the dangers of vaping.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Lazar, one of the hospital-based pediatricians here at Lincoln Memorial. Today we're going to cover the dangers of vaping in 10 short minutes, so buckle up. So we'll start with a roadmap where we're headed. We'll begin with some terminology and anatomy so we're all using the same language. We'll cover some basics, followed by quick facts. We'll talk about the health impacts of vaping, and then we'll conclude with some action and resources so I don't just leave you hanging without any ways to kind of help you or loved ones or people you know. So, terminology and anatomy of e-cigarettes. So, vaping is the umbrella term we use for what's known as ENDS, or electronic nicotine delivery systems. These are also called e-cigarettes. They go by lots of different names. E-juice or e-liquid, vape juice or vape liquid. This is the liquid that is combusted, or it's aerosolized rather, inhaled by the user and then exhaled. It almost always contains nicotine and sometimes does contain other compounds or drugs. E-cigarettes generally have a lot of different names with some nuance between devices, which we'll see in a subsequent slide. Some of the names you'll hear are e-cigarettes, e-hookahs, mods, vape pens, tank systems, or ENDS. Juul is a very common name you'll hear in popular media. This is kind of like we use Google to represent search engines or Xerox to represent copy machines. This is just the kind of biggest name in town in terms of brand names of e-cigarettes. So that is just a specific brand name. And it's worth mentioning here that for FDA regulatory purposes, e-cigarettes are considered a tobacco product. So anytime there's legislation regarding tobacco products, that does also include e-cigarettes. Even though they often do not contain tobacco, they are lumped together with tobacco products for regulatory purposes. EVALI is e-cigarette or vaping-associated lung injury, and that's one of the most serious consequences health-wise of vaping physically. Here's the anatomy of an e-cigarette. The basics are a battery activates a heater. This heater converts the liquid into an aerosol. This is inhaled by the user and then exhaled in a way that bystanders are also can also inhale that and be affected, similar to secondhand smoke generally. The main kind of idea of this slide is just to show the wide variability in e-cigarette type products. Some of them kind of look like traditional tobacco products. Some of them look like they came off of a spaceship. But some of them, kind of importantly, are designed to look like other devices to avoid surveillance from a parent, a teacher, etc. So it makes it kind of harder to see what is an e-cigarette when some of them look like, for instance, a flash drive. What's in this e-liquid? A lot of stuff. Importantly, it's kind of an important thing to understand that a lot of these products that are contained in the e-liquid cause harm. Some of them are known carcinogens or cancer-causing agents. Nicotine is almost always in e-juice. Some of the compounds are linked to lung injury specifically or general cell injury. One thing that's not on here is vitamin E, which is a preservative that's heavily implicated in EVALI cases. Some quick facts. So e-cigarettes are the most commonly used tobacco product among youth, and use is rising quite rapidly. A lot of people want to know, are e-cigarettes effective at smoking cessation? The answer is maybe for some populations done in a very specific way. There's more research that's needed. There was one study that did show in non-pregnant adults who abstained completely from traditional tobacco products that e-cigarette use did help in terms of long-term abstinence rates. However, this was very particular, and a lot of times complete abstinence from tobacco products is not what we see in the real world. So if you're thinking, I'm just going to try this because it might help me quit, probably not the wisest idea. We still need a lot more. We still need to learn a lot more, and there's other more demonstrably effective ways to quit smoking that we'll cover a little bit later as well. There's a lot of label inaccuracy, especially when you consider that a lot of these products are bought or are obtained from your friend or your family, from your drug dealer, from an unofficial source like the black market. So what's on the label isn't necessarily what's in the liquid itself. In terms of CDC facts and statistics, February of 2020 was the most recent month that we have up-to-date figures. So at that point, we had about 2,800 cases of EVALI, or that very serious lung injury, resulting in almost 70 EVALI-caused deaths. So here's some other quick facts. I won't cover all of these, but some of the more salient facts that are important to emphasize is that e-cigarettes are not risk-free. That's a common misperception, but it's just not true. Almost all of the liquid contains nicotine, which is highly addictive, and some of the liquid can contain other drugs you might not even know about. There's little consistency across the different products and labeling, as we've discussed. And then last, use of this has been associated with an outbreak of very serious lung injury. So, how do e-cigarettes hurt us? Nicotine is one of the main drivers of the physical harm it does to bodies. Among other things that nicotine does, it can cause mood disturbances like anxiety, depression, attention deficit disorder type of symptoms, blood clots, atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries, dizziness, sleep disturbances, nausea, vomiting, ulcers, heartburn, lots of not so fun stuff. It has specific consequences in pregnant people. It increases pregnancy-related weight gain, pregnancy-related elevated blood pressure. It also has impacts on fetal brain development. So this is something we obviously don't want to impact negatively if we're hoping to have a baby. In children and teens, their brain development doesn't fully complete until their early 20s generally, and nicotine does have implications and effects on brain development, so also not so good. Increased risk of other addictions, and youth and teens and kids that start with e-cigarette use are more likely to go on to use traditional tobacco products, and also it does have pronounced mood effects in young people as well. You can get poisoned from ingesting, either by swallowing the e-liquid or just getting on your, in your mucous membranes, like your eyes. Of e-cigarette related poison control center calls, 50% are for people 5 years old or under. So that's a really unfortunate effect of having these products lying around the house, is that young kids love putting things in their mouth and are inadvertently but injuriously harmed. And then last is EVALI, which we'll discuss in a few slides. So how much nicotine is in one of these pods? At least 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. In this next slide, we see that among the differences in pod sizes, you get at least 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine, but in some of the larger pods, that could equal about 90 cigarettes worth of nicotine. These are a couple CT scans of lungs that are affected by EVALI. Once again, this is very serious lung injury. It can land people in the hospital, in intensive care units, and it can even kill people. There are certain, in addition to just general e-cigarette use, there are certain things that increase your risk of this. Most of the cases, by a long shot, have been linked to e-liquid that contains either vitamin E as a preservative or THC, which is the chemical, the active chemical in marijuana. And also, the majority of people with EVALI obtain the vaping liquid from kind of unofficial, informal sources, such as their family and friends, dealers, or online purveyors. Fortunately, since the peak in late 2019, cases of EVALI are declining, so hopefully that trend continues. The top graph is what I want you to look at here for children and teens. The left-hand side shows that cigarette use, traditional tobacco, has been slowly declining in the last 10 years, which is great, but consequently, e-cigarette use has been rising at an even faster clip, so that's not so great, especially when we consider the harms, as well as the fact that a lot of these e-cigarette users go on to use traditional tobacco products later in life. So, what can we do? I don't want to paint a picture of just doom and gloom and fear. I want to leave you with some resources for what you can do for your own life, or if you have loved ones that you are concerned about. Educate ourselves. That's what we're doing right now. Talk to your family and friends. If you have kids, I think whether you suspect their use or not, it's important to have a talk about tobacco and e-cigarette use, similar to a birds and the bees talk. It's the best time to have this talk is before you suspect anything's happening. And a preventive talk is, kind of opens the door to further conversations. Set an example. You can impact policy by communicating with your government representatives. If you're a parent, the CDC has this really, really nice kind of 4-page, very digestible resource. It's kind of like if you're going to talk with your teen, have this awkward conversation, don't know what to say, etc. This gives you a little bit of info and kind of talking points and education, so you look like you know what you're talking about and have a more productive conversation. The next resource I'll talk about is The Real Cost. This is a kind of quick hit. It's geared towards youth. It's kind of a quick-hitting, myth-busting, educational website, also with some quitting resources. A similar but different resource is thetruth.com. This also is kind of myth-busting and quick-hitting education tailored towards young people. It has opportunities to find rallies in your area that have kind of anti-smoking or anti-e-cigarette initiatives, and there's a place for sharing your story so that you can kind of feel like you're not alone or you're part of a larger community. Smokefree.gov is the CDC's just general tobacco quitting website. It has subsites for people with particular needs such as veterans, teens, women, Spanish-speaking people, and senior citizens. And this is the LMH Quit for Your Health. It's a wonderful resource for people in our community where we work one-on-one with individuals when they're ready to step up to the plate and develop a tailored plan to help them quit. The AHA has been fighting big tobacco for years now. In the interest of time, we won't cover all of these, but it began in '61 with the Kennedy administration forming a commission against smoking. I think importantly, 5 years later, we put warnings on cigarette packs to show the dangers associated with that. We continued the fight through the early 80s and 90s, and then we increased in 2009, there's more legislation, and we increased tax on tobacco products as well. That's all I got. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, John. I think we certainly appreciate now, even more so, how dangerous the e-cigarettes and vaping can be, and hopefully we can carry that information out as we talk to others, but certainly appreciate your expertise and insight. Well, we've had a break here after Dr. Lazar talked about vaping, so we need to get back up and get some activity going. We did cardio earlier, so now Dave Alianello and the physical therapy folks are going to work us and walk us through some strength training tips. So we'll see if we can get our dumbbells and our barbells out and do a little strength training for about 9 or 10 minutes.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. We will start with the pushing exercise, and the basic push exercise is going to be the push-up. Off the ground, it looks like this. One more. And a modified version of that is going to be on an incline. We'll use the stepper here. Thank you, Cody. More modified exercise will be the knee push-up. And if that's challenging, we go to our rubber band and do a press out, which works the same muscles, but it's a little bit easier. Thank you. Another push exercise is going to be the overhead press. For that, we'll use a dumbbell. Of course, it goes without saying, body mechanics is critical when you're doing any kind of exercises. Also, before you exercise, you want to do a dynamic warm-up, which these two did before we got started. And at the very end, we end up with some static stretching to cool down and get the blood toxins out. This is going to be the same thing with the rubber band. Cody's going to demonstrate the bench dip or the chair dip. He's pushing his body weight up using triceps, shoulders, and chest. Thank you. Taylor will do a chair dip using the arms of the chair. That's the simplified version. If she extends her legs out a little bit, it's a little bit tougher, but she can progress to that one. Cody's going to demonstrate the tricep, the isolated tricep extension. Elbows stay bent, and he straightens them out using just the elbow extensors. Taylor will demonstrate a modified version of that. Pull back. Arms are staying straight. Again, triceps are engaged. Some of the shoulder muscles are engaged. And relax. Thank you. So there's some ideas of pushing exercises. Next, we're going to go to a pulling exercise. One of the basic exercises for that is the pull-up. Understand that most people do not have a pull-up bar at home. This is a very challenging exercise, but it's a great one once you get it down. Thank you, sir. If this is challenging, we're going to move to our band again, which is going to mimic a pull-up exercise, but we're pulling down with the band. Another pulling exercise will be our dumbbell bent over row. Again, he's pulling, getting some bicep work here, backward shoulders, scapula, stabilizing the core, getting some lat work done. And we go back to our band, and there's our modified version of the pull. Squeezing the shoulder blades, a little bit of bicep work, back of the shoulders, and she's stabilizing with the core exercise, or with the core muscles. And you can pull with the curl, and modify that with the band. Cody will demonstrate a body weight squat, freestanding. And you can modify that by adding weight to your core, making the legs work a little bit harder. I'm going to modify that to a chair squat. Cody will demonstrate that. off of a chair, off of a bench. There you go. Thanks. And then we're going to do a long arc quad exercise. Go ahead. If squatting isn't capable, you're not capable of squatting at this point, we can still work the quads by doing that particular exercise right there. Thank you. Next series are going to be our lunges. We've got a front lunge. And our side lunge. There we go, thank you. And we're going to modify that to just a step up. Front step up. Now let's do it with a knee kick. Good. And then a side lunge, or side step up. Perfect, thank you. The next muscle group for our legs is going to be our side hip muscles, which get ignored a lot, so we're going to work on those. This will be a side lying side leg raise. There you go. Good, thank you. And a standing side leg raise. Just use this for support here. And moving down the chain is going to be our calf raises and our heel rocks. And it goes without saying, make sure that you're hanging on to something at home if balance is an issue. And we can also do this from a sitting position. A lot of people think that the crunch has fallen out of favor lately because of back issues. If you do it correctly, it's still a good exercise. Knees are bent. He's not going to put his hands behind his head because you tend to pull up, maybe hurt the neck. He's just going to slide his hands up towards the knee, keeps his lower back flat to the mat, shoulder blades up off the table, squeezes his core when he comes up to the top. Another modified version of that is what they call the McGill crunch. You're going to straighten out one leg and do the same crunch. Now this ensures that the low back stays straight with one of the legs. The low back stays flat with one of the legs straight. We're going to do a reverse curl up or reverse crunch. Both things are coming up. And you notice the lower back, lumbar spine is staying nice and straight. Thank you. Taylor's going to demonstrate a modified reverse crunch. This will be our supine marching. Back and forth, alternate legs. Your standard bridge. If you have back issues, obviously you'd pay attention to what your back feels like when you do this. You don't want to go into hyperextension if you don't have to. Progression of that to make it a little bit harder is our stability ball bridge. Even more difficult would be our one leg bridge. Yeah, very challenging. And do it off the ground. Thank you. A modified version of that will be our heel bridges. There you go. And the glute squeeze. All she's doing is squeezing her glute muscles. Thank you very much. Okay. This requires a little bit of twisting. We used to call this the old boxer's crunch. So elbow to the opposite knee. Did you notice he's not grounding his neck? His arms are loosely beside his head. There you go. That's incorporating the side muscles, the side obliques. You can come on up. And then another one we're going to do is the standing oblique. So, and if balance is an issue, hold on to something. There you go, thanks. They call this one the bird dog. Opposite hand, opposite leg is going to be extended. Getting some shoulder extension, getting some low back stabilization, some glute extension and contraction. And Taylor will demonstrate a modified version of that. She'll just do one leg. Both hands will stay on the ground. We can also attack the core by standing with our rubber band again. Use twisting and pulling down. A great standing core exercise. This is very functional for athletes. Okay, Taylor will demonstrate a modified version of that. Without the pull to the side, she's just going to hold it and twist to the side without pulling down. She's going to demonstrate an anti-rotation exercise. She's holding that. Her body is preventing her from turning this way because of the tension in the band. And relax. Thank you. So those are some core exercises that we wanted to address. I appreciate your attention. Thanks again. Thanks again, Rob.
All right, so after that hard work, you can relax and enjoy the rest of the program without any more physical activity, but hopefully you can keep some of those exercises in mind for those future days where you need to get a workout in quickly. Our final presentation today will be provided by Dr. Philip Savage. He's going to be talking about winter heart health and safety tips, and I think we've got a cold front moving through right now, and those 70-degree temperatures are going to be going down into the 40s and 50s, so it won't be long, and perhaps we'll be shoveling. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Savage. He joined us in 2004, earning his degree in medical technology from Benendum School of Medical Technology in Pittsburgh. He earned a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry from the University of Rio Grande in Rio Grande, Ohio. Received his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine degree at Pikeville College of Osteopathic Medicine in Pikeville, Kentucky, and completed his residency in internal medicine at Riverside Methodist Hospital, of course, in Columbus. He is board certified in internal medicine and leads our hospitalist group, and he'll talk about winter heart health. Dr. Savage?
Thanks, Rob. I have the common sense portion of the talk today. So what we're going to talk about is these things right here. Overexertion, cold exposure, overheating, taking your medications, getting your immunizations. So one of the big things that we have, especially in Licking County, is we have people that sometimes are older, they sit around, they have a genetic predisposition to have coronary artery disease that they don't have. You can't pick your parents, basically. And during the wintertime, we have what Rob said, we have cold spots and we have snow. And people decide after sitting around for a while that they're going to get up. It snows the night before, they're going to get up, they have to get to the car and to go somewhere, and they shovel snow. And what this happens is we have overexertion. When you have overexertion, your heart demands more oxygen than it normally needs. And then the blockages that are in there, because we have a lot of people walking around with heart disease that they don't know about, they start getting chest pain, and then they end up having a heart attack. So we see this many, many times, dozens and dozens of times the ER. People come to the ER. I just shoveled snow, and I started having chest pain. And then Dr. Rajib, who was speaking earlier, gets to do a cardiac cath on them. So the other thing, people bundle up, they wear boots that are heavy, they trudge around when it's cold in the snow, same thing, overexertion, chest pain, end up having a heart attack. So one thing that you can do is make sure that you plan, have plenty of time to get places, and avoid overexertion. Another thing that we have is avoid cold exposure. So how do you do that in the wintertime? You bundle up. So when I was a kid, my mom, who's still alive, thank goodness, she's in her mid-80s. She weighs probably 125 pounds. She always put on a shirt, a sweatshirt, a sweater, and a jacket to go out. She dressed in layers. So wherever she went, she could, if she got too hot, she could take the layer off, and then she would be just right. So what cold exposure does is it constricts your blood vessels. Again, your heart doesn't get enough blood, and you have a heart attack. Conversely, avoid overheating. So if you bundle up too much, you get too hot, your blood vessels then they dilate, and your blood pressure goes down. Again, your heart doesn't get enough blood, and you can have a heart attack problems from that. So one thing that we see quite a bit is people can't get to the store to get their medications. And I can't tell you how many times where I see a patient in the hospital and they haven't taken their medication for days or even weeks. And they're in the hospital for high blood pressure issues. They're in the hospital because they had a heart attack or something else. So one thing that you can do is you can plan ahead. Ask your doctor to give you a 90-day supply, and then make sure that if you are running low, that you make a plan before you run out. Instead of 2 days before you run out, go getting your medication. You can go get your medication weeks or a month before, and then that way you will not run out of your medication during the wintertime. Get your immunizations. So we don't have a immunization yet for COVID-19, but we do have one for the flu, and it's available, and you don't want to have the flu and COVID-19 at the same time. We have immunization for pneumonia, and if you're over the age of 50, you should be getting that as well. And we also have immunization for chickenpox, and you should get immunization for that after 50 years. The other thing that you can do is stuff that your mama taught you. Wash your hands. Avoid sick people. If you're sick, stay at home, drink plenty of water, and get sleep. And then for winter safety tips, so especially if you're older, I have this talk with my mom and dad. They're both in their 80s. And whenever you go out in the wintertime, make sure you wear good shoes with good tread on the bottom so you don't slip. Avoid going out when it's icy. So if it drizzled and frozen during the nighttime, wait till later in the day to go places so that the city or somebody else can, do your sidewalks, make sure that there's no ice on the roads and you don't slip and fall. One thing that we're worried about is hip fractures and pelvic fractures, especially with older folks. If you're wobbly, make sure that you use your walker or a cane and get help, especially if you're very unsteady. So the other thing is, especially if you are older and you have coronary artery disease, make sure have somebody else do it. If you have a walkway that needs to be shoveled, relative, service, neighborhood kid, I'm sure that there'll be plenty of people that help you and avoid overexertion and ending up in the hospital. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Savage. Yes, maybe common sense, but very appropriate and timely. I think we'll call that, part of that at least, the three little bears methodology. Not too hot, not too cold, just right, and we'll be all set for our heart health in the winter. So thank you, Dr. Savage. Once again, a lot of this stuff, it's important to hear and refresh our minds and our memory. We think maybe that we can still do what we used to, whether it's shoveling or running, or and sometimes acknowledging that having someone else do that or getting some help can save you and your entire family a lot of time and hopefully pain. All right, at this time, it's really my pleasure, and I mentioned earlier, Park National Bank is, as I said, always so involved in everything in and throughout the community. And in fact, Dan DeLauder was the first chairman of the HeartChase event. I think I got him involved in that, and he has not let me forget that. But as he does with anything, Dan really got this off to a tremendous start the first, I believe, 2 years. And since then, we've had other leadership from many of the companies that I mentioned earlier that are now chair, or sponsors, I should say. Once again, I had the privilege of doing it this year, and we've already gotten a commitment for 2021 from Park National Bank Chairman and CEO David Troutman, and he's here to share some words with us today.
Did I promise that?
You did.
Good afternoon, Rob. Thanks
You
so
heard
much.
about the heavy boots too. Did you listen to that
I got
part?
the boots. I got the boots. Good afternoon, everybody. In his book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, Jordan Peterson tells us in Rule 9, assume the person you're listening to might know something you don't. That's an easy assumption when you're listening to Rob Montagnes or the Licking Memorial Health Systems professionals or our good friends at the American Heart Association. I've learned a lot today. I hope you have too. And I can't wait to share my knowledge with my family, friends, and anyone who will listen. I want to thank Rob Montagnes for his leadership. I want to thank the Licking Memorial Health team for hosting and support. I want to thank our gifted and dedicated speakers for educating us about heart health. I want to thank the remarkable AHA team for all the work that goes into planning an event of this nature, particularly one that's held virtually. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to call my father. My dad's 86 years old. He lives by himself. I've called him every day since mid-March just to see how he's doing. He will tell me he's doing great, and then he'll tell me how much he benched today. My dad bench presses every day. That conversation would not be possible if it were not for the heart research that permitted him to survive a heart attack and bypass surgery 12 years ago. So why do we do what we do? Why do we educate? Why do we advocate? Why do we raise money? It's so sons and daughters can have conversations like that with moms and dads. I'm looking forward to serving as chair of the 2021 Licking County HeartChase, and I want you to keep an eye out for details on how we'll celebrate the 2021 event coming this spring. Rob, thanks so much.
Dave, as always, so appreciative of you stepping up. Great words. And since your dad is bench pressing at 86, I will ask him to shovel my walk this winter because he clearly is in good enough shape to do it without needing the assistance of Dr. Raju. So, well, it's certainly been an interesting year for all of us with the COVID-19 pandemic. We know everyone's been affected, all businesses, but despite that, the Licking County community really came together again to support this event and the American Heart Association. I don't take failure well or lightly. And while I think what we did as a community was not a failure, I certainly am going to work extra hard with David next year to not only set a very challenging goal, but to reach it. To give you some sense, we have been, I believe, the second most lucrative fundraising event in the entire country, as I understand it. And that's comparing us to much larger cities, obviously. Cities like Cincinnati, Cleveland, Indianapolis, and really throughout the country. And as I mentioned, Dan DeLauder started this out. In the first year, we were well over $100,000 and have been over $100,000 each year, I think reaching perhaps a peak of 140, if my memory serves me correctly, perhaps one year. But significantly, we have done a lot of fundraising. So our goal this year was $150,000. I think we were really on a nice pace early on to get there with some tremendous sponsorships from the companies I mentioned. But unfortunately, by not having the event in person, and all the folks who would have gone out and raised money through getting pledges and support for participating in this event, obviously we were not able to even approach that number. I will share with you that the current fundraising total is $70,369. Certainly the least we can do at Licking Memorial Health Systems is get us halfway there, so we will make sure we throw in another $5,000 to get that to $75,369. And certainly anybody out there watching that was going to participate or get pledges, we would still welcome any of that financial support. But we do feel good that we have made some good progress this year. And like I said, I'm committed to helping David, as we do each year here at Licking Memorial Health Systems with this event. But setting another goal, I don't want to tell him he's got to set it at 150, but if he does, whatever he sets it at, I will work diligently to try and help him get there. It shouldn't be hard to beat 75, David, so I've lowered the bar, but I will help you beat whatever you set. I want to thank the American Heart Association, certainly the executive leadership team that allowed me to serve as the chair this year, everybody who planned to participate or is watching right now. Hopefully, once again, it was educational, and hopefully this will be the only time we have to do this event virtually, and we'll be back in downtown Newark next year in our costumes, in our outfits, running around doing fun, heart-healthy activities by the courthouse. So with that, everyone stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.